Chills went through my spine as that message appeared, even though it was normal for your Pikachu to stare at your painting with you. I pressed B, and sure enough, BRVR was standing in front of the painting. It seemed like he had a sad expression, like he was remembering long-lost memories. He turned to me, still with the same depressed expression. He looked like he was about to cry. I felt sorry for him and wished there was something I could do to cheer him up. BRVR walked up to me and asked me a question, which is normal for your Pikachu to ask you a question every now and then. But what made my blood chill was what he asked. BRVR wants you to know if you still love him. It had an O, yes, and an X, no, option. BRVR has never asked that before. I immediately clicked 0. He smiled, and then bent over laughing. I was a bit confused as to why he would have a laughing fit. When he was done laughing, he looked back up at me with an evil smile. A message appeared at the top of the screen. BRVR knows when you're lying. He turned back to watch the TV. By this point, I didn't know what to do anymore. I knew for sure that all this wasn't supposed to be happening. I thought that maybe if I restarted my GameCube, everything would go back to normal. I got up, reached for the restart button, but when I pressed it, nothing happened. I pressed it a second time, and still nothing. The game cannot be reset right now, the message appeared on the screen. My heart stopped beating for a second. After dumbly staring at the screen for a solid minute, I sat back down and decided I would continue playing. Might as well see where this goes, I whispered to myself. I just looked around the room for a minute. Other than the wallpaper, dolls, and TV, everything seemed to be the same. I tried to smile while looking at the old Pokemon mini and posters, but I couldn't bring myself to. The normally cute and cheerful music seemed to make the room more dark and disturbing. It looked as if all the morbid dolls had their eyes focused on me, like they were about to reach out and grab me, then slowly tear apart and devour my flesh. BRVR wants to go outside. The message appeared on the top of the screen. Before I could do anything, BRVR went outside, and the game forced me to allow him. My breath caught in my throat when I went outside. The sky was blood red, with even darker clouds swirling in it. Strewn all across the lawn were dead Pokemon corpses. I couldn't tell what many of them were. Most of their limbs were torn off, their faces shredded, entrails everywhere. I felt sick, like I was about to throw up. BRVR circled around them, then turned to me and gave me an evil grin. He walked up to me and asked a question. BRVR wants to know, if you like what he's done to the place. I immediately clicked X. His sick grin deepened even more. He walked over to a skitty corpse and threw it at me. Its body parts broke off and flew everywhere as it bounced off the screen. After many agonizing minutes of being forced to watch BRVR toy with the dead body parts, he walked over to the garden. We stepped into the garden. 2 plants were fully grown. Instead of fruits, they had grown Pikachu heads. BRVR plucked one and started to slowly eat it. My lunch started to rise up my throat, but I forced it back down. I tried to turn away from the gruesome sight, but something glued my eyes to the screen. After taking this time, BRVR walked over and ate the other head. Once he was done, he cast a wicked smile and leaped out of the garden. Me forced to follow. BRVR was apparently done messing around, going around outside, for he went straight inside. I was hoping he was done and we would just stay inside. I now much preferred the morbid dolls over the body parts, but he wasn't done showing me the world he had created yet. Almost as soon as we went inside, BRVR went immediately to the back door. Guess who was forced to follow yet again? When we went outside there weren't any more corpses to my relief, but the sky was still an ominous blood red. When I tried to go back inside, he wouldn't let me. BRVR would just turn and give a disapproving shake of his head. So I was forced to stand there. The Viridian Forest bus pulled up and BRVR walked up to it. Without me even clicking on it, the transition played normally, the bus riding over the map to the Viridian Forest. But when we got there, the whole forest was on fire. Dead Pokemon were laying everywhere as the trees wildly burned, their bodies charred, black by the flames. BRVR seemed unaffected by the blazing fire. He skipped over to the patch of mushrooms. They looked like they were bleeding. BRVR ate one without asking for permission, and gave a satisfied nod when he was done. Then he ran over to the bell that starts the Pokemon concert. Instead of BRVR being surrounded by Clefairies, he was surrounded by those morbid Pikachus. Using the bells, they played the most haunting, blood-chilling tune I'd ever heard. I was awestruck. It sounded so beautiful, but so horrifying. It was high-pitched and made my ears ache, but I was in a trance and couldn't think to turn the volume down. After what seemed like years, the play was finally over. Glancing around, BRVR seemed satisfied with the burning forest and headed back towards the bus again. I was forced to stand outside while I awaited the next horrors BRVR would inflict upon my eyes. I thought he would want to take the Mount Snowfall bus, but he had other ideas instead, for he let that bus just pass on. Instead, he decided to take the Cobalt bus next. Same simple transition, same horrifying scene. The beach was littered with pieces of corpses of Pokemon you would normally find roaming around there. The ocean looked like blood, and floating in it were more body parts from the dead Pokemon. It then became more apparent to me that BRVR didn't like other Pokemon. We then played a game of checkers. Instead of rocks, we used internal organs for pieces. BRVR beat me by a long shot, although that was because I couldn't think straight using the entrails as checker pieces while being surrounded by dead corpses. He laughed when he beat me, like this was all normal and supposed to be happening. Then, for a brief moment, a look of regret and sadness swept over his face. I felt a longing to reach out and comfort him, but as soon I felt a longing. Okay. So I used the C-stick to pet him, but as soon as the cursor touched him, his normal infuriated and demented look came back. He ran off over to the fishing area, with a little person called me unwillingly followed behind. BRVR stood on his rock and threw out the fishing line into the blood ocean waiting for a bite. I did nothing, for there was nothing I could do, but he turned and gave me a menacing glare like I was supposed to be helping him. That's when I remembered the bait. I clicked on the jar labeled bait, but instead of a chocolate-glazed donut, I got a rotting brain. It was falling apart and covered in greenish-brown mold, yet it was still throbbing. I quickly tossed it into the ocean. Shortly afterwards, BRVR caught something on his line. With a great yank, a creature came flying out of the ocean. I swear to God, this creature shall forever haunt my dreams. It looked like an oversized dark purple Magikarp, but it was foaming at the mouth, while a green acidic blood poured from numerous gashes all along its body. Multiple organs clung to the many spikes sticking out from its body. Parts of its scales had been scraped away, exposing muscle underneath. And some parts of the muscles had been what looked like eaten, leaving bones sticking out. It flopped around and gasped for air while disturbing gurgling sounds emitted from its mouth. I screamed when I saw that vile creature. BRVR turned to me as if he heard me and grinned. He slowly climbed down from the rock, taking as much time as possible to let the wretched creature suffer that much more. Then he started to eat the Magikarp, while it was still alive. I screamed again and covered my mouth as my eyes were forced to watch the gruesome sight. Once he was done with his meal, he turned back to me and smiled, a happy, playful smile. I couldn't believe this monster was once my close virtual friend I looked forward to seeing every day after school. After that traumatizing event, BRVR cheerfully skipped along down the beach back to the bus. Stopped singing Pika Pikachu. His merriment made the situation that much more horrifying. While waiting for the Mount Snowfall bus, BRVR stood in the middle of the walkway staring at me, His face was blank and showed no signs of emotion. Even though I knew he couldn't hear me, I whispered, "Why are you doing this?" A tear started to fall down my face. BRVR made this world to please you. My blood turned to ice when that message appeared at the top of the screen. BRVR cast at me another sick, wicked grin that stretched from cheek to cheek. More tears started to sneak their way down my face. The Mount Snowfall bus finally arrived. I don't know if I was happy at the sight or petrified at the thought of facing another gruesome scene. The same thing as before. Innocent transitions, not so innocent sights. Frostbitten carcasses lay strewn out ungloriously across the frozen land, most half buried in snow. Surprisingly, there was no blood or entrails laying about. This had a more sad atmosphere than morbid. BRVR slowly walked over to where Kecleon and Jigglypuff would normally sing, but since they were dead and buried under the snow, where he took their place. BRVR sang the most beautiful sad song I'd ever heard. His harmonious voice sounded like violins playing the most tear-jerking tune I'd ever heard. He had a depressed and sorrowful yet focused expression while he sang the tune, which is just what the song sounded like. I couldn't control the tears that started flooding down my face while he sang. My poor emotional heart broke in two listening to this sorrow-drenched melody. After what seemed like an eternity, BRVR finally finished. He looked me dead straight in the eyes with the most sorrowful, depressed, and utterly hopeless expression anyone had ever seen. I longed so much to hold him in my arms and comfort him, but he quickly turned away and ran towards the second half of Mount Snowfall. We stood in front of the ruins of truth. For many moments, BRVR just stood dead, still, while staring at the ruins. Then he glanced at me, a deep, meaningful look in his eyes, and ran inside. It was jet black inside, like it was supposed to be. He used a thunderbolt to light the electric flowers which caused the entire ruins to light up. All along the walls, ceiling, and floors, many different words were written in blood. Help me. Why? I must die. Kill me. It's so cold. I'm so lonely. Where is she? Come back. Why can't I die? BRVR walked over to the other side of the ruins where the true or false tablet stood. I was forced to click on it. BRVR was abandoned by his best friend years ago to be replaced by a new best friend and was left to rot alone in this virtual world. True or false? I finally understood what all this meant. All those words on the walls, they were from BRVR. This was all my fault. I left him, my best friend, to die alone. No, he couldn't even die if he wanted to. He was forced to drag out his miserable existence over the years. I didn't blame him for wanting revenge on me. I deserve this. I slapped myself across the face. What was I thinking? BRVR and Pokemon Channel was just a game. I wasn't supposed to devote my life to them. They were only meant to be created to amuse and entertain the mind of a child. They weren't real. I took a minute to ponder over my last statement. They weren't real. I thought about all the things BRVR had done to traumatize me and get revenge for abandoning him for so long. Hell, this was all just too real. I selected O for true because it was. I admitted to abandoning BRVR and leaving him alone to rot. Instead of the tablet sinking back into the ground, it glowed green as if in approval with me. The screen slowly faded to black, except for BRVR. He stood in the center of the screen with a tired, angry, yet sad expression. I didn't know what to think of him anymore. I hated him and wished I really could kill him. But I felt sorry and wanted with all my heart to help him and make things better. BRVR feels the same way about you. Those messages didn't shock me anymore. If anything, I was expecting it. After a few long moments of just staring at each other, I finally started to lose it. What are you going to do to me now? BRVR wants you to suffer the same way he did. He cast me one last wicked grin, the widest, most horrifying I had ever seen, and the screen cut to black. After a moment on the title screen appeared. The continue button was gone. I sighed in relief that this horrifying reunion was over. I got up and looked back at my desk. On it was a Pikachu doll Z.